Hello, and welcome back to the Self-Actualization in the Age of Crisis Chapter Summary Series. I'm your host, Ron Rivers, and in today's summary, we're going to be discussing the introduction to Chapter 0, Time, and the Divinity of the Moment. So our core focus today is exploring the concept of time as the fundamental nature of being. It is the most accurate description of the nature of being in our immediate present, and this is accurate from the philosophical, the spiritual, as well as the cosmological perspective, which we'll dive deeper into throughout the chapter. So each of us embodies this very specific kind of consciousness, right? The human consciousness. And we all embody it from our own unique conscious coordinates, from which all else extends, right? And when I say all else, I don't just mean the outside world that we can see individually, but the entirety of the cosmos, much of which is, beyond our scope and knowledge. Each of us inherit a past that we had no say in crafting, both through specific unique things like birth lottery, as well as the totality of events preceding us. For most of human history, we've really struggled to fully express our divinity in the moment within the regime of social, political, legal, and economic systems that prioritize and reinforce very specific ways of being. None of us can escape the fact that we inhabit this ever-present now, and our circumstances play an outsized role in dictating the way we think, the way we believe, the way we speak, the way we interact in our actions. So much of it is influenced by the circumstances we inhabit and, to an equal extent, the systems that shape those circumstances. To be human is to be the totality of this experience, all of it, while at the same time inhabiting a very fractional perspective of it. So this idea of human beings, the individual being the totality of existence, is nothing new. This has been around for some time in many spiritual philosophies. So for example, in the Vedic Upanishads, it talks about the Brahman, which is the ultimate self, the supreme self, as well as the Atman, the individual self. And in the first chapter, it kind of describes how these two are one. They're a singular being. Chinese Taoism unifies all existence within its foundational principles, saying that it's all a singular thing. And as we'll dive into, our present understanding of cosmology and physics supports this view. For example, the cosmologist Carl Sagan once said, "We are the universe experiencing itself." What we now know, what's different about our immediate present, is we know that to be materially accurate. It's an accurate representation of our physical universe, not just our internal spiritual universe. Now, in terms of the origins of this idea of consciousness as a hyperstructure, we can kind of consider the human time experience of individuals who lived immersed in nature. And if you've ever spent time in nature, it's patterns upon patterns upon patterns. So it makes sense that they would kind of come to this conclusion. And it's really delightful that our most modern science and knowledge has kind of reached the same conclusion. But let's talk about the symbiotic nature of it. So, consider a virus entering your body. When a virus enters our body, it becomes part of us. And it has its own specific agenda. It has no idea of the hyperstructure that is Ron or any other human being. But at the same time, its agenda and its actions impact me and you and everyone else who kind of embodies a virus. But in that moment, we are one. Our functions align to produce very specific outcomes that are reliant on both individual parties, the virus and the individual, to produce, right? We get a runny nose, we get sick, fever, etc. And we can consider one really fascinating tidbit is the size of a virus in relation to a human being is roughly equivalent to the size of a human being and a sun. So just to kind of give you some perspective on the scale and scope of the individual relationship. Now, we can also go beyond the virus because viruses, we don't technically know if they're alive or not. Let's consider a bacterial colony. There's a 1-to-1 ratio between bacterial cells and bacteria and human cells in any individual's body. So we are as much the bacteria as they are us. It's an indistinguishable whole within the moment. So this relationship between the individual and the external universe as being a symbiotic whole is something that, again, extends omnidirectionally. It's philosophically accurate, it's cosmologically accurate, but it's also accurate biologically. So it's not something that's some abstract concept or some just kind of really kind of out there philosophy. It's the actual nature of being. The human's time experience is at the same time an individual happening, a collective happening, and then a total happening, as in the individual and collective existing as a singular happening within a moment. It breaks dualism and connects us in a way that the traditional salvation hierarchies and their philosophies of meaning and value cannot.